What are the key issues that have come out thus far?
Well, there were several. The one was yesterday, especially, several quite radical proposals and expectations. For example, nationalization of land, which was not only proclaimed by our two, or requested by our two previous presidents, but also almost all our foreign visitors were, viciously encourage or rather sell the program that they used, which were all nationalization. So that was quite one of the big topics. When we listened to the reports from the regions, again, things like land expropriation, the amendment of the constitution, the rejection or acceptance, depending on where you stand, of ancestral land, discussed yesterday, but apparently and clearly the people have not finished speaking about it and thinking about it.
Does it appear that some speakers may not want to speak so much on the ancestral land issue? And if that's the case, can it be discarded?
Well, look, there are two points of view on the table at the moment. The one is the point that says it's a very contentious issue. It may bring division amongst the people, and I think the Attorney General, he mentioned that for example, Windhoek itself, there are three groups, distinctive groups, who consider Windhoek as their ancestral area. I think we should look at ancestral land from 2 points of view. The one is a more settling position, who settled where, and for that reason are being entitled to land. On the other hand, there's also a legal issue of people who felt that at some stage or another they lost a very specific piece of land, or a farm or farms, or a traditional area, which they can easily prove in court, and therefore they have a note of action to go to court. So I think the issue has not been really discussed between the two groups. There's a kind of a uncertainty of what people are speaking about when they use the words ancestral land. I would think the majority do not want ancestral land to be on the table for the future.
Now, advice has also been, Professor, that from some speakers to the conference to still attempt to find ways to engage those who opted to actually boycott the land conference. Now, these are especially groups that are at the forefront of advocating for land for all. And will their absence from the land conference have any implications at all?
Look, their fear, if I understand them correctly, was that their positions will not be discussed. Now, what we have seen is that several other people came forward, for example, with the whole issue of urban land. It's very, very open and big on the table at the moment, as well as ancestral land. I mean, there may be opinion differences on ancestral land, but it is on the table, and it is there's a robust debate going on in the land conference on those two issues. So it's a pity that the AR and Landless People movement are not there, because they are the original proponents of these ideas. But I think their fear and their presumption that it will not be really discussed is not justifiable. It is really being discussed at the moment. And we find the two opposing groups with a lot of openness.
What are the main sentiments from the regional groups?
Well, it's very clear that, I mean, all the regions, they want a faster land reform program, but they are also willing to discuss different forms of land reform. I mean, the whole idea of communal land was on the table and is on the table, with many new proposals. We've heard last night that South Africa is now giving title or plan to give title to communal land owners, and that has also been mentioned in the conference. Other forms of title or stronger ownership rights have been on the table. We have the discussion on cultural customary land rights, and also the whole issue, as we have already said, on ancestral land. These land issues, they are on the table and they have been discussed, and they came from the regions. Depending on which region, some were very strongly against cultural or ancestral land rights to be on the table. Others really felt very strong that it should be there, and it was not always predictable which group would say what. The other issue was that came from many of the regions is an amendment of the constitution. But when Dr. Kavanagh answered questions, he, I think, convincingly pointed out that whatever changes we want to make after this land reform program, an amendment of the constitution is not necessary.
Just lastly, Professor, before I let you go, some countries also presented papers. You mentioned briefly about South Africa, of course, on the land reform processes. Are there any that particularly stand out from which Namibia can learn from? What are the lessons?
Look, I think the difference that I picked up there and what we are doing at the moment is Zimbabwe, Cuba, and there was a third one that I can't lay my hand now. Oh, it was the representative from the African countries, who all three were quite strong on nationalization of land. Now I think there's good reason why not to follow that route. Mr. Epson Wanguta of the Bank of Namibia spoke, and he mentioned something very important. He said there are two things that we should not play with. The one is land tenure. He said nothing brings more uncertainty if land tenure is not understood, it's not clear, and it's not secure. He also mentioned other issues like, for example, not printing too much money and other things. But in terms of our conference, I think his position on land tenure is something to be thinking of.